welcome to Terra Nova. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms. Been thinking a lot about Mother's Day, and it's my first Mother's Day without my mom, and just thinking about how many sacrifices she made as a single mom raising us, and just feeling really grateful for her influence in my life. So thank you to all you moms out there, and especially you single moms, and the way you sacrifice for your kids. Know that someday they'll be telling a group of people they're grateful for it. I don't know what to get out of that. I don't know, but happy Mother's Day. Hey, we're jumping into this brand new series today called Winning the War in Your Mind. But before we talk about that real quick, I just want to let you know next weekend we're switching up our service times. This is pertinent, especially to our Saturday night crowd, because beginning next weekend, Saturday is going outside at 6 p.m. It's the return of sundown Saturday nights. We did that last summer. A bunch of you were like, hey, we should do that again. So we're doing that next Saturday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come out, bring some friends, invite some people. And then Sunday mornings are now going to shift to the indoors at 9:30, 11, our normal service times. Kids classes for all three of those. You can check our website for more information on all of that. But today, as I said, we're beginning this series that I'm really excited about. Called Winning the War in Your Mind. The subtitle is Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. And this is a series that I think will make you a better mom or a better dad. It will make you a better spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend, or maybe just a better friend. It'll make you a better employer, a better employee. It'll just make you a better human. It'll make you a better human for anybody who happens to be on the other side of you. This is a series that will make it better to be on the other side of you, and this is just as important, and this is huge, it will be a series that will make it better to be on the inside of you. I mean, this last year has been hard on the mind, has it not? It's been hard on my mind. We found ourselves just like cycling, I think, probably all of us, maybe most of us, in these emotional thought spirals of anxiety, depression, fear, anger, confusion, futility, self-doubt, judgment. Our minds just clouded with thoughts often against ourselves, often against other people, tell us we're not enough, we don't have what it takes, we'll never have enough, we'll never get through this, nothing good can come from this. Thoughts of anxiety and defeat and fear, thoughts that tell us just to give up and walk away and nothing will ever be better. And thoughts that not only attack ourselves, but thoughts that attack others. Paranoid thoughts about other people, the people around you, including some of the people closest to you, and they're out to get you, and they meant to hurt you, and those people who are doing those things are trying to destroy us. Thoughts of judgment and division, and at times hate and anger. Our thoughts often just spiraling, creating like these vortexes, these maelstroms, if you will, these whirlpools that like you feel like you're just getting sucked under and trying to maybe get yourself out, and then other times just letting it run. I'm just going to go with that, and I'm going to feel that. This year has been hard on the mind. It's been hard on my mind. There have been times this year when my mind has been a very inhospitable place for me to live. And this is not good. This is not good because the lives that we live are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The lives that we live are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The lives that we live are often not just a reflection of, but the direct result of the thoughts that we think. Here's what I mean by that. The families that we raise or hope someday to raise will be a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The marriages we have or the serious relationships we have are a reflection of the thoughts that we think. The jobs that we do, the moods that we feel, the conflicts that we experience, the outcomes that we keep getting, they are expressions of the thoughts that we think. And during this series, we're going to be taking a look at some profound, way ahead of its time, wisdom and insight from the scriptures and the latest in scientific research into our minds, into our brains, to learn how the brain works and how you can rewire it and retrain it to learn how to identify those toxic thoughts that you have, to catch them quickly and how to replace them, how to recognize the deeper patterns in our minds and alter them and actually create new patterns and develop new habits that will make your mind a life-giving place for you to live. How does that sound? That sounds pretty good, right? And here's my hope. My hope through this series is that personally I will develop the habit, and just maybe you might as well, if you care to develop the habit of seeing every struggle in your life, both internally and externally, through the lens of what you're thinking, through the lens of your thoughts and how you think, to learn how to ask yourself regularly, what are my thoughts about this, and how might the way I'm thinking about that person or this situation actually be contributing to what's happening right now. Now, the series, just so you know, is somewhat loosely based on a new book that just came out by a pastor named Craig Groeschel called Winning the War in Your Mind. And we've actually got one of our groups is actually doing a book club on this right now through the series, through the next few weeks, and in the book. And then we bought a bunch of extras. So check this out. We bought a bunch of books to give away. And if you write Winning the War book or something like that on your Connect card, whether you're doing it digitally, you can do it online, you can do it physically on a Connect card. We're going to do like this random drawing this week, and a bunch of people are going to win free copies of that book, but only write it down if you read. And you know who you are, and you know who you aren't, right? I don't read books, but I'm going to get that free one. Don't do that. Okay, so it's based loosely on this book, but we're going to give a bunch of why. But here's why this is all so very important, because everything we do begins in our minds. Everything we do, both good and bad, it all begins in our minds. Everything we create begins in our minds. Every problem we solve begins in our minds. Every person we encourage, every conflict that we experience, it all begins in our minds. Every bad habit, every addiction you find yourself repeating, every dumb thing we say, everything we do, everything we say, everything we feel, everything we are begins in our minds. And we sometimes talk about our inner world, our inner experience, and the different aspects of it is like related to different parts of our physiology and our anatomy. And people will say things like, "Oh, dude, you got to go with your gut, man. You just got to like trust your gut. It's like somewhere down here, like go with your gut." And then somebody else will like, "No, bro, you need to trust your heart. You need to follow your heart. Your heart will never lead you wrong. That's somewhere around here." And then somebody else will say, "Use your head, man. Come on. Use your brain. You got to think this through." And it seems like we're so segmented. Like, so what do? Do we go with our gut? Or do we go with our heart? Or do we go with our head? It's like, are you more of an instinct, intuition kind of person? Or are you more of an emotional, feeling kind of person? Are you more like rational, logical kind of person? But the reality is this: our gut and our instinct, that intuition, and our heart, and our emotional center, and our head, and our logical center, they all reside in the same place. The space between your ears. They are all just different ways of describing or of different parts of your brain and your mind and how your brain and your mind work, all interrelated, all interconnected. Now, throughout this series, we're going to be talking about the mind and the brain. I thought I would just let you know how I'm distinguishing the two. When we talk about the mind, we're talking very specifically about the thoughts and ideas and assumptions and beliefs and patterns that we carry around with us in there all day long, every day, including the ones that reside in our unconscious mind they're hardly even aware of. And when we talk about the brain, we're talking about literally the physical organ and its related parts and how it works. But everything we do, everything we say, everything we feel, everything we are, it all begins right here. It all begins in our minds. The life that we will have today for the rest of the day, it's all beginning and playing out right there. The life that you will have tomorrow, next week, next year, the life you hope to have, it will all begin in your mind and it will all play out in your mind. And that means every change that I hope to make or that you hope to make in the seasons to come must begin in our minds. Changes in our circumstances, changes in our relationships, changes in ourselves. It all must begin in our minds. If you don't change how you start out thinking, you will not change what you end up doing. And the growth, this means the growth that we hope to have, including our spiritual growth, by the way, including our spiritual growth and our hope of connecting with God better, it must begin in our minds. But it's deeper than that. It actually goes deeper than that. If you're a God-believing person or a Jesus-following person, you believe that there's more to this life than this life. There's more here than meets the eye, that we are part of a spiritual dynamic, a spiritual reality, or a spiritual environment, if you will, in which we exist and participate and engage, and there is a war. There is a war in the spiritual world that rages all around us in this unseen reality. And every morning you wake up in in a war zone. Every morning you wake up on the battlefield. There is a battle between life and death, between darkness and light, between good and evil and truth and deception, and it's raging all around you and in you all the time. Now, if you're not really a God, Bible, Jesus person, first of all, just thanks for tuning in or thanks for being here. Just really glad you're here. You may not see it in quite those same terms, but here's what you know. You're in a battle. There is a battle for the kind of person you want to be, and sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. Why is that? There's a battle for the kinds of relationships that you hope to have, for the kind of world that you hope to create around you, and sometimes it just seems like an uphill battle because every single day we're fighting a battle for our lives and for the lives of other people around us, and the battle for our lives is fought in our minds. The battle for our lives, the kinds of lives we have, and the kind of lives that we hope to have and want to have, that battle is fought and won or lost every day in our minds. Now, I want you to picture something with me real quick. Picture a war between two opposing sides. And one side is just like in full-scale, total war attack mode. I mean, they're launching grenades and firing missiles, and they got snipers on the front line taking their enemy out. And the other side doesn't even know they're in a fight because they wake up every morning in Southern California, and the weather's great, and the sky is blue. Like, it's beautiful. But people around me keep getting wounded. And everybody's getting hurt, and marriages are being torn apart, and families are being destroyed, and kids are getting their lives wrecked, and there's like twisted steel and human carnage all around us, and it's so confusing. We don't understand why or where it's coming from. I don't know why this keeps happening, we say. And then there are times that we get this sense like we are in a fight, and we get our ire up, but we don't even know who we're fighting or where the fight is, so we keep drawing the battle lines in all the wrong places. Now, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? That's absurd. I mean, that never happens, except it does every single day. Ever wonder why you can't change? Why you can't seem to break that cycle that haunts you, that you hate? You don't even want to, and you keep on doing it. You wonder why you lose your temper so easily? Why you fight with and behave the worst towards the people you love the most, even when you swear to yourself and maybe even them that you are so sorry and you won't do it again. You ever wonder why your relationships with people that you actually care about are so darn hard, and why it is that you so often start out with good intentions only to press the nuke button yourself and destroy the whole thing? And why is it that you are at times so filled with darkness and despair and anxiety and judgment and negativity and hopelessness? You're in a war. You're in a war, and you woke up this morning with missiles flying, but they weren't flying over your head. They were flying in your head. The battle for our lives is fought in our minds. Now, throughout this series, we're going to be looking at some words written by a man named Paul, or St. Paul, the Apostle Paul. He was one of the very first followers of Jesus, one of the first leaders of the Jesus movement. He's a deep and brilliant thinker, widely considered to be one of the most influential people in human history, hashtag no big deal. One of the most influential people who's ever lived, and he talks and writes about this battle that we're in often, and he talks and writes about our minds very often, because he understood very clearly that though the battle seems to play out in our relationships, in the spheres around us, in society, in cultures, and the things that we create, the battle might play out there, but it is fought in here. It is fought in our minds. Everything begins in our minds. Our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs, even those that run very, very deep and that we're rarely even aware of. And so he writes in one of his letters to some of the Jesus followers in the very Greek city of Corinth. He writes this. He says, though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. Let me hear you say wage war out loud. 1, 2, 3. Wage war. We don't wage war like the world does, though we live in the world. In other words, we are very much surrounded by the culture and the ideas and the assumptions and the values of the world that we live in. For him, it was the ancient Roman Empire. For us, it's Orange County, and to us, it is like water to a fish. We can't even see it. Though we live in the world, we do not wage war like the world wages war. Now, we could just camp out there, like for the rest of our time. If you're a follower of Jesus, listen, if you're not, by the way, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're just kind of catching this, you're tuning in, you're just checking it out, you can wage war any way you want. You can drop every grenade you feel like dropping if that's where your value system is, like you do you. But if you're a follower of Jesus, listen, we do not wage war like anyone and everyone else around us. We do not wage war on Facebook. We don't wage war behind the secrecy of our keypads. We don't launch grenades into the unknown and just see who it might blow up and hurt. We don't wage war with cancel culture. We don't write people off. We don't wage war with hate or division or animosity or the demonization of other people or the outrage that is just like so ubiquitous in society today. We don't wage war like that. We don't do that. We don't bow up. We don't power up. We don't talk down. We don't look down or put down. We do not wage war the way the world wages war. The weapons that we fight with are not those weapons, not the weapons of this world. It's better than that, he says. And our weapons are way more powerful than that. He goes on to say, on the contrary, our weapons, the weapons that we fight with, have divine power to demolish strongholds. Now, that word stronghold refers to a fortress. We don't see fortresses very often in our world today. In the ancient world, they were everywhere. They dotted the landscape. Any decent-sized city was fortified. Walls, thick walls built around it, buttresses and towers, outposts along the way. Strongholds and fortresses were everywhere. It was the way that war was done. Fortified walls, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, making that wall as impenetrable as they could until a force of even greater power came against it, demolishing strongholds. We write that phrase he uses there was actually very common language in a city like Corinth to refer to siege warfare. Siege warfare is when a large army would surround a city, they would starve it out, and over time they would demolish its walls. They would pull down the walls, breach the walls, and go in and take the city captive. It was language for that, and he's saying, our weapons, we don't fight with those weapons the world fights with. No, that's not us. They are divinely powered, literally powered by God. That's actually what the phrase is, powered by God to demolish strongholds. And these strongholds, these fortifications, he says, he goes on to say, verse 5, are the ideas that people have. What we demolish are arguments, ideas, like assumptions, stories that we all create, and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We fight with different weapons, because our enemy is a different kind of enemy. It's ideas and thoughts and ideologies and stories that without even realizing it are actually keeping us from even knowing God and what God is all about. He says we demolish strongholds. We demolish these arguments, these things that get in the way of us and who God really is. And he says we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. We tear down the wall, we rush into the city, and then we capture the thoughts. The thoughts. Now, throughout this series, we're going to be talking about thoughts on three different levels of thoughts. On the one hand, there are what might be just called our individual thoughts, just like these thoughts that are streaming through our minds at an unbelievable rate all day long, like thousands and thousands of thoughts every day, some of them productive, some of them really toxic and destructive. In fact, Jan Pincott in her book, or her article in Psychology Today, Wicked Thoughts, cites this research saying there are like hundreds of invasive, intrusive thoughts that hit us every single day, and you've experienced like, where did that come from? Where did that thought come from? There is a constant flow of thoughts running through our minds. Our minds are like this unceasing fountain of ideas and conversations that we have and beliefs and judgments and assumptions and imaginations, and that's what's flowing inside of you. right now. That stream of consciousness, you might call it. In fact, you might picture your mind as like a wire, and strung along that wire is this endless series of beads, and every single bead is like another thought passing through your mind, and it's going on right now. It's happening right now. Right now, your mind is working a little like this. You're thinking, capture a thought, tear down a stronghold. Gee, I wonder what Paul meant by that. And you look down at your Bible, or you look at your notes or your phone, and you notice your hands, and you've been biting your fingernails, and you're like, oh, I've been biting my fingernails again. That's such an ugly habit. Gee, I hope nobody sees. That's kind of embarrassing. I was chewing them a lot at work this week, wasn't I? Oh, my job is stressing me out. My boss, he doesn't like me very much. What a jerk. I would love to give him a piece of my mind. He's on my back. I'm carrying that company right now. Nobody there does anything. I bet he's going to fire me. What am I going to do if I lose this job? What am I going to do? How am I going to raise my family? What am I going to do next? Am I ever going to find a job that I like? I mean, I'd love to give him a piece of my mind, but that couple sitting in front of us, they're holding hands. That's cute. My husband doesn't hold my hands anymore. They seem happier than we are. I wonder if their marriage is better. That guy on stage is still talking, isn't he? Boy, he sure talks a long time. I wonder if he's going to wrap it up quickly. I'm getting kind of hungry. I feel like pizza tonight. That's so unhealthy, though. Man, I've gained back all that weight I lost and then some. I'm such a loser. And just on and on and on it goes, right? That's how your mind works. That's how the beads, how the stream of thoughts, that inner conversation, and it's constant. And sometimes we go through a day and it feels a little like our mind is a little slow, right? Like there's not a whole lot going on. Sometimes you go a whole day through and your mind feels a little like this. It's just like, did anything happen? But the reality is your mind is never still. It's actually never, ever like that. Observations, assumptions, stories, judgments, fears, concerns, arguments at a staggering rate, such that we don't even notice them, we're not often aware of them, and we don't even remember them as we're having the vast majority of them, a constant flow of thoughts running through your mind. And that flow of thoughts begins to form patterns. This is important. That flow of thoughts begins to form patterns. Every time you think a thought, your brain is literally redesigning itself. Every time you think a thought, your brain is redesigning itself around that thought. And the more you think that thought and repeat that narrative and go over and over that memory and how it makes you feel, the neurons in your brain begin to fire together. They line up and fire together, strengthening that neural pathway, if you will, and that single thought becomes fortified over time with many, many, many other thoughts. These neural pathways are a little like a footpath across a lawn. If you take off on a shortcut across like a perfectly manicured lawn just one time, it hardly seems to make any difference to the lawn at all. And in fact, the grass just returns to its shape within a short period of time. You take off across that shortcut again the next day, still not really anything. Days after days, 5, 10, 15 days, don't really start to notice anything. But over time, if you repeat that path back and forth many times a day, and other feet begin to travel that path as well, you will form a well-worn path into that lawn. And the same thing happens in your brain, the actual physical brain. They can actually measure it. They can watch it happen in fMRIs, both positively, by the way, and negatively. The more you think a thought, the more that thought grows. The more you think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought the next time until it eventually becomes a default thought. And when we describe people, and we put labels on people, we describe their character, often what we're actually describing is the patterns of thought that happen in their minds all day long. Caring people, that's such a caring person. He's such a caring person. They're simply the kind of people who have caring, generous, empathetic thoughts running through their minds. There are actually people who think that way, and it comes out of their lives. Cranky people are just people who have constantly disappointed and critical and negative and complaining thoughts running through their minds. Pessimistic people are people who live with thoughts like, things will never turn out, just wait for the other shoe to drop, things are going to go badly, I always get sick this time of year. Optimistic people are people who live with the exact opposite kind of thoughts, and they say really goofy things like, there aren't problems, just possibilities. And they believe that stuff because those are the thoughts that they live with. And here's my point. The kinds of thoughts that I have all day long and the kinds of thoughts that you have, and not just in a day, but day after day and week after week and year after year, the kinds of thoughts that you've been having for your entire life, many of those thoughts given to you by other people in your childhood have worn specific paths or patterns in your brain until they become default thoughts in your mind. What you think about most will grow, and eventually those patterns go underground. They become part of my unconscious mind, my beliefs, my operating system, if you will. Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, calls these our automatic thoughts. That there's this fleeting, rarely conscious background assumptions and beliefs that we have built up over years and years and years about ourselves and every other single person in our lives and life itself, like a stronghold, but buried deep underground. There are individual thoughts that are just streaming through my mind all day long, and there are patterns of thoughts that have become characteristic for me, mindsets that have formed well-formed patterns and paths in my mind. And then there's my unconscious mind, which is actually the most of it. This vast, vast reservoir of ideas and beliefs and assumptions that become like the operating system of my life. Now, here's the good news. The good news is, and it's the good news that both Scripture and now science just so clearly teach, you are not a victim of that. You are not a victim of your past. You are not a victim of your thoughts. You are not a victim of your DNA or your genetics. You can actually identify your toxic, unhealthy, false thoughts and narratives and patterns, and you can actually replace them and rewire your brain. In science, it's called neuroplasticity. In the Scriptures, it's called renewing your mind. And so, as Paul is writing to the Corinthians, he says, listen, we have weapons that are powerful. They are powerful to pull down the strongholds that have been built up in our minds that actually separate us from really knowing and experiencing who God is. And we can pull those walls down and we can run in and capture the thoughts that are inside them. The thoughts that are inside, not to kill them, but to actually change them, to make those thoughts obey Christ, to bring those thoughts and those assumptions of my life into alignment with who Jesus is and what he says is real. I love how one of the paraphrases of the Scriptures called The Message, it words that section this way. He writes it this way. Eugene Peterson is the author. He says this: we use our powerful God tools for smashing warped philosophies, tearing down barriers erected against the truth of God. Get this: fitting every loose thought and emotion and impulse. What's that? That's your head, your heart, your gut. It's the whole thing, fitting every loose thought and emotion and impulse into the structure of life shaped by Christ. That's what we do. That's who we are. So over the next few weeks, we're going to learn how to do this. And we're not just going to hear how to do this, we're going to actually practice it. Every week there's going to be homework so that you can actually put it into play over the course of the week. And we're going to practice doing it. Though mastering it will certainly take longer than 5 weeks, we're going to get started. And here's why. The reason why is because the life that you live is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. The life that you live is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Change your thinking, change your life. Think about this. The life that you lived this past year, as you think back through it, was constantly being tugged in the direction of your strongest thoughts, wasn't it? Often pulling you away from, frankly, the life that you wanted to live or wished you were living, and the life that you will have next year. And the year after and the year after that will be a reflection of your strongest thoughts. If you think and believe that you cannot do it, you probably can't. If you think and believe that you will never be happy in your current circumstances, you probably won't. If you think you are a victim, that you are powerless over everything that keeps happening to you, you probably will be. If you think that your relationships are doomed, that that you can never trust people because they will always leave you and let you down, that is most likely what you'll experience. In fact, it's most likely what you will create. Your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts, which raises a question that I want to kind of wrap up today with, and it's this. Does that excite you or scare you? Are you excited about the direction that your thoughts are taking you? Your mind is a battlefield. The battle for your life and the kind of life you want to have is fought and won or lost in your minds. Now, I want to wrap up today with an exercise to get us to think about the things we think about. To think about our thoughts, to think about what you think about. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to kind of go over like the past few hours or maybe the past few days or even the past few months, and I want you to think about what you thought about. And we're going to do a little bit of a thought audit, okay? I'm calling it a thought audit. And if you're following along, I've got a few categories. This is on your app. It's on the website. It's on your notes if you've got physical notes in front of you. And there's this little thought audit with a few scales 1 to 10. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to just identify, hey, what have my thoughts been like over the past few days or maybe the past season? And the first category is this: anxious thoughts versus peaceful thoughts. Anxious thoughts versus peaceful thoughts. As you think about your thoughts, have your thoughts been anxious? Have you been worrying about your health, worrying about the virus, worrying about our country, worrying about masks, worrying about your kids, worrying about relationships, worrying about money, worrying about people and what people think about you? Are you often thinking anxious thoughts, or are you often thinking peaceful thoughts? Yes, there are challenges. There are challenges we face, and I will face them one at a time. I will cross those bridges when I come to them, and I will trust God to meet me there when I get there, but I will focus now on what I can do, not on what I can't do. And because you think those kinds of thoughts, you have peace, like you sleep really well, your resting heart rate is really healthy. Do you tend to think more anxious thoughts or more peaceful thoughts? And if you follow along on the app or on your outline, just give yourself a little grade there. Like, where do I tend to trend a little bit? The second category is this: negative thoughts versus positive thoughts. Do your thoughts trend more negatively, more critical of others, more quick to find fault with things and with people around you? Life is hard, and it's always going to be hard, and it's only going to get worse, waiting for the other shoe to drop, what's sometimes called scarcity thinking? Or are your thoughts generally trending a little more positively? You tend to believe the best in people. Life is mostly good. God is always good. The world is full of possibilities, more abundance mentality. Are your thoughts trending these days a little more towards the negative side, more towards the positive side? Give yourself a little grade. And then the third category is this: discouraged thoughts versus courageous thoughts. Do your thoughts tend to be a little more discouraged, filled with self-doubt? You'll never be enough. You'll never have enough. You'll never be able to do enough. It'll never work. You won't be happy. It hardly seems worth trying. Like it's all in vain. Nothing really matters anyway. Just discouraged, defeating thoughts. Or are your thoughts generally a little more courageous? A little more courageous. Like you are called and gifted by God. If you're not dead, you're not done. There's always going to be another opportunity around the corner for you to do good and make a difference with your life, with whatever is in front of you, and you're still bringing all that you have to see what God will do, and He'll meet you in the rest. You can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Courageous thoughts. Do you tend towards discouraged thoughts, or maybe more towards courageous thoughts? One last category. I had like 10 of them, but for the sake of time, I'm only giving you 4. One last category: selfish thoughts versus generous thoughts. Here's what I mean by that. Do your thoughts tend, this is a tough one, tend to be a little bit more about you? Probably most of us. A little more about yourself, maybe what people think of you and what you deserve and what you're not getting and what benefits me and what can I get? What can I get thoughts versus generous thoughts. By that I mean, how are others doing? How can I be a blessing to them? How can I contribute what I have to other people? How can I be a blessing? How can I further God's kingdom with my life? What can I give? Do you tentatively think, what can I get thoughts, or what can I give thoughts? Give yourself a little grade. Where do you kind of land on that scale? And here's why: because what you think about most will grow. It will grow in you, and your life is moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Are you excited about the direction that your thoughts are taking you? So here's your homework for this week, and every week we're going to have some homework. Your homework for this week is this: to think about what you're thinking about. That's your homework. Just all week long, just think about what you're thinking about. If you come into next week far more self-aware than you came into this week about what you've been thinking about all week long, you will have gotten an A on your homework, right? Just think about what you're thinking about. Catch yourself frequently through the day. Learn to see your struggles in life. I want to learn to see my struggles in life through the lens of what am I thinking about this? What do I believe? What are my thoughts? And then to ask yourself the question, as you think about what you're thinking about, am I excited about the direction those thoughts are taking me? That's what I've been thinking about. Am I excited about the direction that these thoughts are taking me today? Interesting historical fact. Right after writing the letter that we were looking at, 2 Corinthians, that letter to the people in Corinth, the Apostle Paul arrives in Corinth just a few weeks after that. And he stays in Corinth for 3 months. And during that 3 months, he writes his most famous letter of them all, known as the letter to the Romans. It's this epic letter that captures the battle that we all find ourselves in and what God is doing all about it. And towards the end of that letter, it's almost like with the words of his earlier letter, 2 Corinthians 10, still in his mind, he writes this: do not conform to the pattern of this world. We might live in this world. That is not who we are. That's not how we act. That's not how we fight. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Paul knew that to change your life, you have to change your thinking. To change an outcome, you have to change the way you think. And he believed, and science now 100% agrees, that is possible. You can renew your mind. It is possible to change the way you think, even the deeply held patterns in your life, the characteristic thoughts, the automatic thoughts of your life, and you can be made. In another letter, just a little bit after this letter to the Romans, he writes a letter to the Ephesians where he describes it as being made new in the spirit of your mind. The very spirit or attitude of your mind can be made new. Now, how does that happen? That's the question, right? And the answer, and you already know, is do not miss next week and part 2 of Winning the War in Your Mind. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for giving us just like such amazing, amazing brains, that our minds are such beautiful gifts from you, and we want them to be beautiful places for us to live. We believe you want them to be beautiful places for us to live. And so we just pray over this journey of a few weeks that we'll be on together. Would you please guide us into the skills and the knowledge and the habits that you've always intended for us to develop, that would help us root out our stinking thinking, the lies and the deceptions and the toxic negative thoughts that cause us to spiral and end up ruining our not just our days, but our relationships so often and our futures. Would you help us identify those, and would you continue to give us your divinely powered weapons to tear those down, to capture those thoughts, and make them obedient to Jesus? We look forward to this journey, and we thank you for your power in us that will guide us through it. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, once again, happy Mother's Day weekend. So glad you guys were able to join us. Before you go anywhere, if you know of anybody who could benefit from what we just talked about or from this series, I would love to encourage you to invite them to join you or invite them to watch with you. Share this with somebody else. Maybe bring them into this journey with us. Also, before you go anywhere, would you please take a moment to fill out that Connect card, either online on your app or here physically in person. If you tore it off and start to fill it out, we would love to hear from you. By the way, again, if you're a guest, thank you so much for being with us. We'd love to hear from you too, just get to know you. And while you're filling out that card, Dana had mentioned this thing called Terra Nova Tours coming up. It is the way to maybe take the next step at part of the Terra Nova community. And if you've been around for a little while, that is probably for you. Just write Tour Me somewhere on that Connect card, or you could check it out on our website as well. And speaking of stuff that's on our website, in just a few weeks, the same weekend as the Terra Nova Tours, we're having the Serve Day at the Abbey, and you can help us serve the Orange County Rescue Mission. that we have this great relationship with. You can find out more about that at ourterranova.com/theabbey. ourterranova.com/theabbey. We'd love to get you in play as we serve our friends at Orange County Rescue Mission. So jump into that. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic Mother's Day tomorrow, and we will see you back next weekend, sundown Saturday nights at 6 p.m. outdoors. Sunday mornings are going to be indoors, 9:30, 11. See you back next week. God bless you guys. Have a great week.